Good evening, and we give God praise for the presence of each of you here tonight as we come together for our second night in our 8th annual Interfaith and Ecumenical series of study. I am so excited about this journey that we are on as we travel throughout Montclair and connecting with various leaders who are serving and doing such incredible work through their various agencies and platform. Every night that we come together for these 10 weeks, we will have the opportunity to hear about the magnitude of their work, their reach and impact, and also discern how and ways in which we can participate in not only supporting the work, but also bringing relief to people who are suffering and even those suffering in silence. And so tonight, our focus will be on food. And we are grateful for our sister, Miss Ann Mernin, who is Executive Director of Tony's Kitchen, who will be sharing with us in just a few moments. I want to now enter a word of prayer, if you will join me. Thank you, oh God, for the vision that you have before us of bringing together people in the township, that we might get to know one another, that we might hear the challenges and struggles that are before them as they seek to meet the needs of various populations within the township and beyond. We pray for fruitful conversation and for depth of understanding. And we pray, Lord, that you will touch the hearts of people, that we might be more compassionate and sensitive to one another, and that we might share resources that makes for our well-being and wholeness. So thank you, God, for what you will do. We place this night into your hands, and we look to be led by your spirit. In the name of our God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and of Jacob, we do pray. Amen and amen. I want to, since this is also considered a Bible study, just to take a time to reflect on a text that deals with feeding. And this is a text from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 9, verse 12 through 17. And I recognize that we are an interfaith and ecumenical group of people. So I lift this text up, mindful of the various ways in which we come to God. Here is a reading from the passage in Luke. The day was drawing to a close, and the 12 came to him and said, "Send the crowds away so that they may go into the surrounding villages and countryside to lodge and get provisions, for we are here in a deserted place." But he said to them, "Give them something to eat." They said, "We have no more than 5 loaves and 2 fish, unless we are to go and buy food for all these people." For there were about 5,000 men. And he said to the disciples, "Make them sit down in groups of about 50 each." They did so and made them all sit down. And taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he broke them and gave them to the disciples to set before the crowd. And all ate and were filled. What was left over was gathered up, 12 baskets of broken pieces. In this reading, which is called the reading of 5,000 or the feeding of the multitudes, we see a total number of people being fed. By some calculations of being 5,000 people or more. And so the focus of the story is very simple. Thousands of people gathered in a remote place where Jesus was teaching and healing them. And when it came time for the evening meal, there was nothing for people to eat other than 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. From here, however, Jesus was able to provide ample food for the whole crowd and miraculously multiplied the quantity of food so that everyone was well fed, and there were 12 baskets of food left over. Now, what I love about this story that I think is applicable to people of all faith is that when there seems like there is not enough, by faith, we can put it into the hands of God and see our little turned into much. And so I believe it's God's desire that no child would go to bed hungry and lacking of the necessities of life. And just as in Montclair, where there is more than enough, where there is great abundance and supply of resources to be able to make sure that everyone is well fed, so it is in country. The one thing that does make for food insecurity is greed, overconsumption, people taking more than their share and leaving little for others. And so as we gather tonight, we look for pathways, or ways in which we can ensure that the little bit that has been made available is magnified exponentially so that all have. And so whatever our faith perspective is, we know that it is our little is better in the hands of God than it is in our own. And together as a people and as a community, we can ensure that our sisters and brothers are well taken care of. And so that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And I am so grateful to have had the privilege of working with our sister Ann Mernin on some occasions. And our church, Union Baptist Church, has supported not only providing financial resources, but also our young adults and other members of the community came and we served and gathered food and made possible for distribution. And we continue to look forward to our partnership. Want to just say a word about our sister Ann Mernin, who is the executive director of Tony's Kitchen. She transformed the soup kitchen into a major hunger relief and prevention organization. She created innovative programs and service delivery models to connect with difficult outreach populations. And she has a variety of programs that are made available. And I like this result-oriented introduction of our friend. They have Tony's Cafe food truck, a school and pre-K partnership, after-school programs, college pantries, summer food outreach, soup kitchen, and program partnerships with over 50 local community organizations. She oversaw, listen to this, she oversaw significant growth from 7,000 meals provided in 2010 to over 1 million meals in 2020. Did you hear what I said? From 7,000 meals in 2010 to over 1 million meals in 2020. Current outreach includes weekly distributions to 950 families, home delivery to 400 plus seniors, and partnerships with supportive services across 4 communities. She has, by her leadership, grew revenues to support this growth and collaborated with funders to replicate new programs and other partner organizations, and significantly expanded and diversified the donor base to over 2,000 actively engaged volunteers. She refocused core programs to amplify the benefits of connecting food insecure individuals and families with stabilizing resources, medical care, dental, one-on-one mental health therapy, gentle exercise programs, preventative case management, and enrollment in safety net programs. She instituted special program focus on hard-to-reach populations and undocumented families and senior citizens, has helped create a culture of ongoing program and evaluation improvement, and has raised the profile of Tony's Kitchen to become a household name in the township of Montclair and beyond, and has opened new rental thrift shop to support clothing needs of low-income families and provide regular income stream to support all of these food programs. So sisters and brothers, it is my joy to introduce to you and to open now this time of sharing to our friend, Ann Mernin. Let us receive her with love. Come, Ann.
Thank you, Pastor. That was so lovely. And it's such a pleasure to be here tonight. I was reading through your series and I'm so impressed that you're doing this. It's such a gift to our community. Thank you so much, Pastor and Union Baptist Church, for inviting me to be here this evening on behalf of Tony's Kitchen. I thought we could talk about why we do the work that we do tonight. Tony's Kitchen's vision and mission, and then a little bit about the context within which we serve, so the demographics of the community around us, and the diversity of populations that have food insecurity. And then we can just walk through who we were pre-pandemic. Of course, there's always pre-pandemic, then what happened with COVID, and then we can look to the future. So why do we do this work? We do it as a food ministry of St. Luke's Church, which is located at the corner of South Fullerton and Union Street in Montclair. And as a Christian ministry, we are founded on the idea that we are called to serve one another. And in particular, those who have the need for food, for clothing, people who are sick, those who are imprisoned. It's a foundational calling of the Christian faith, and that frames all of the work that we do at Tony's Kitchen. So Tony's Kitchen was founded 40 years ago. This is our 40th anniversary year, in 1982 as a soup kitchen. And our founding manager was a woman named Antoinette Green, who ran the kitchen from 1982 up to the mid-90s. And I never had the pleasure of meeting Tony Green, but I understand she was a short woman, very strong, someone that was very warm and established a culture of dignity and respect in the kitchen, and someone that our guests respected deeply. And I think that that legacy of Tony Green has lived on through all the years of Tony's Kitchen and still frames the work that we do today. Tony's Kitchen vision is really quite simple. We just envision a community where everyone has access to healthy food, and that access is reliable access, so they can go to bed at night knowing that they have access to healthy food throughout the week ahead. We provide food to our neighbors with food need in ways that respect their dignity, improve their health, and foster independence. So I thought we could start with some demographics. So Montclair is located in Essex County, which is a very diverse county. It has both urban and suburban areas. Within Montclair, we have a population that's been fairly stable for several decades, in the range of 38 to 40,000 people. The demographics of the town are changing. We are now at about 60% white. Our Black population is around 21%. We have a growing Hispanic or Latino population of 10%, and a small Asian population, a small number of families that identify as two or more. You can see our age distribution. About a quarter of our township are children. Then we have another almost 60% that are in the 25 to 64 age range, and a small senior population of just over 10%. Our housing stock is fairly evenly split between single-family homes and apartments or other dwellings. We have about 7% of our population living below the poverty line. And I would take care to look at that when we look at that 7%, remember that we're living in a very, very high cost of living area. And then about 90%, just over, have access to broadband. So one of the questions that comes up a lot is, what is the difference between food insecurity and hunger? And what does it look like in the suburbs? So hunger is when you have an immediate need for food. So I didn't eat all day today, so I'm hungry this evening. Food insecurity is about reliable access to food and to nutritious food in particular, which tends to be a bit more expensive than this highly processed food that low-income populations often are consuming. So to address food insecurity, you really want to get to the reliability of access and also to the nutrition component. I chose this photograph for this slide because to me, it speaks very much to suburban food insecurity. And I did it because I honestly don't know the child in this photo, whether she is at this event, which was a food distribution event, because she has food need or because she's helping distribute food. And to me, that sums up food insecurity in the suburbs. People don't necessarily look food insecure when they have food insecurity. We live in homes, we have cars, and therefore we appear to be okay. And that is not always true in the suburbs. And it makes food insecurity harder to get at because part of the definition of food insecurity in suburban areas is that it's hidden, it's unexpected. The county did an updated 5-year plan in 2020, in the middle of the pandemic. And it cited what is known, but maybe not widely known, which is that in the suburbs in this county, there are surprisingly high degrees of homelessness and of food insecurity. So something that we have to look at beyond Montclair, and we have to look at our county. So who are these food insecure populations? We tend to think of food insecurity and we think of people without housing. That's what always comes to mind first. And that is a population that definitely has food need. However, food insecurity goes way beyond that. So some of the populations where you will find higher risk of food insecurity are families, especially families with young children, recent immigrant populations, very high risk for food insecurity. College students, so a population we don't often think of when we're thinking about food need. College students at the 2 colleges in our service area, so Bloomfield College and Montclair State, both have high degrees of kids with high food insecurity rates. You have a lot of kids who are there as first-generation students. Many are working multiple jobs, caring for a family member or children, and really, really struggling to get through food, to get through college. College students need particular attention because college students with food insecurity are at high risk of dropping out of college. And if you just think of what that would look like in today's world, these are students who are driven to get a degree, who have tried to get a degree, who have incurred debt to get a degree, and then might leave without having gotten the degree. So these are students who are at risk of leaving college with debt and no degree. So we really need to pay attention to that population. Older adults, especially again, in a high cost of living area like ours, who are on a fixed income and are certainly in inflationary times like these, are struggling to keep up. Teens, we have quite a few teens in this area that are aging out of foster care. These teens need special attention. They've had struggles in their early life. They may not have all of the tools that they need to enter adulthood, and yet they're expected to care for themselves. So these teens need special care. And then adults with disabilities, physical health challenges, mental health challenges will all be at higher risk of food insecurity. So you can see the populations are very, very diverse across our community. So Tony's Kitchen before the pandemic really focused on its core mission from 40 years ago, which is our soup kitchen. And that mission carries through to this day. So a soup kitchen serves a particular population. In this area, soup kitchens tend to serve adults, often single, not always, but often single, and skewing on the older end. So they tend to be 45, 50 and above. So these are neighbors who are struggling often with mental health challenges, maybe poor social skills, maybe some learning disabilities. So these are individuals who are carrying with them, if you can just think of the years behind them, what that weight might feel like to carry that into your later years. These are our neighbors who need to socialize, who have trouble socializing, who may live partly on their own, may not. There are many people who visit the soup kitchen who have housing, but have trouble engaging in community and find community in a very warm and accepting environment. So when people gather at a soup kitchen, certainly at Tony's, our goal is to establish warm personal relationships and then bring in other services that can serve this population. So prior to the pandemic, we also had, after our meal, we would have nurses in who would provide health screenings, looking at blood glucose levels, blood pressure levels, do some nutrition education, then also some group and individual mental health counseling, some exercise programs, some of the arts that are just help round us out as human beings. So that was there prior to the pandemic for our population using the kitchen. We also developed programs in the last, say 8 years, that recognized that we had unmet food need within the community where the solution to that food need was not a soup kitchen. So a soup kitchen, very appropriate to some populations, not so much to others. So for example, families, seniors who are shut in, kids. These are populations where you might not look to a soup kitchen for a food solution. So we developed different programs, a healthy backpack program, which was a nondescript backpack that had healthy food in it. That was designed primarily for preschool and elementary age kids. They could take that home with them from programs. Some of our local mentoring groups, tutoring groups, the Y aftercare, we might do healthy food, healthy meals at those programs. So kids are leaving those programs with a healthy meal as opposed to snacks and soda. Our summer camps, also a good place to do outreach with food. So we slowly looked around our community and said, what are the groups that are already serving populations that might be food insecure? And instead of inviting those populations into a program that might not be best designed for them, why don't we just embed food in those programs? So in the background, so the program's not about food, it's about mentoring or tutoring or socializing or sports or whatever it is. So prior to the pandemic, we were working with about 50 local partners, and these are some of the ones that we worked with. And these are partners that were very helpful in getting healthy food out into the community, working with us. So prior to the pandemic, again, the end of 2019, we were providing about 240,000 meals, or about 250,000 meals, into the community. And it was primarily through these programs that I've mentioned, our soup kitchen, our various community partners, and then our Healthy Backpack program, which was really for families with young children, and then our summer program. And then, of course, we did some wellness programming on site at Tony's. And then, of course, COVID hit. So COVID came along and everything changed overnight. So if you can think about what we've just talked about, everything is based on food going out into the community or inviting people indoors. And that all changed overnight. So all of our partners shut down overnight, and we couldn't have people indoors in the soup kitchen. So our dining room, which was home to so many and such a gathering space, could no longer invite people in. And I have a picture here of one of my very favorite guests and someone that you may know from around town, a woman named Elaine. And I put her picture. I don't usually do this, but I did this because I thought it'd be helpful to just have a sense of who some of our guests are at the soup kitchen. And Elaine was at Tony's prior to my arriving, which was 11 years ago. And she was on site every day. She often slept overnight on a bench in our hallway. We did that quietly. And she would not only come to eat meals, but she would come and help clean off tables or tidy up, or she would just sit as she was in this photo with her coffee. She loved coffee, and she'd always be trying to sneak a cigarette inside. Elaine was a very well-educated woman. She had a daughter and a grandson. She loved music, and we would have bands come in and play sometimes, and she would dance between the tables. She knew like the fifth verse to every Christmas carol. So really sweet woman and very generous. Elaine had a mental health disorder, and it prevented her from some of the basics of daily living. So she would hear voices. It would interfere with her ability to think clearly, to establish relationships. But she had a home at Tony's, and she had a home in the community. She had people downtown who would, coffee shops that would give her coffee, and she knew people all around. So she was part of our community. And when COVID hit, that all changed. So everyone that ate in the soup kitchen overnight was outside. Not only were they outside, unfortunately it was March and not December, but the libraries were closed, the coffee shops were closed, the other feeding programs were closed. So there was a period even for like a week where there was literally nowhere to use a bathroom until the town put out like 5 porta johns around town. So this population very, very hard hit with COVID. And then our families. So all the families that we worked with through our partners, we knew that they and a whole set of new families would have significant food need. And that need appeared overnight, many of them never expecting that they would be in a situation. But again, everything was closed. All the distribution mechanisms were closed. So the one thing that was open was the governor required the schools to still provide free lunch. So we reached out to the schools and partnered with their food service, which was Pumptonian. And we knew that when families were picking up lunch, they were actually going to need more food in the home. They were going to need groceries. So we began to partner with them. This was the very beginning of us building a pantry. And then I'm sure you all remember how seniors were the group that was most hard hit very early on with COVID, and how terrified our senior population was, and all of us were for our seniors. So what we had was a situation where seniors had food need, but they also had a need for access to food that may not be financially based. So we were very fortunate. We had a great support over at the Montclair Health Department, who helped us put together the list of seniors that needed food. And then the Kiwanis stepped in and arrived for drivers. And we were able to put together grocery bags that had some staples, some fresh produce, and some meals that were made in our kitchen and then frozen. And those went home to, at one point, it was over 600 seniors every week. That has since come down significantly. So it was quite a delivery effort. And you'll see here that we had many, many drivers who were working with the Kiwanis to make that happen. And the Montclair bid stepped in. And so these are the business district employees. And their guys would come over in their truck and pick up the bags that went to the senior housing buildings. So it was a real team effort with seniors. The other issue that was very significant right off the bat was food supply. So one of the most terrifying things that I have ever done in my time at Tony's is day 2 or 3 of the shutdown. I spoke with my staff and people at St. Luke's, and we took our entire food budget for the year and placed an order to stock, to ensure that we had food supply for our community. We also had this amazing support from people around us. Antica Grill stepped up right away. Now, these are restaurants that had to shut down, but they went into their kitchen and they made lots and lots of meals for us, as did Samba. There were a number of other restaurants. Rayo's, who's in town, they make pasta and pasta sauces and beautiful soups. They delivered pallets of food to us. Montclair Bakery baked for us. So lots of local business owners who were themselves very hard hit and struggling still reached out to support us. It was amazing. And we were also really worried about whether we would have enough volunteers, whether we would have the bulk deliveries that we needed to support all of the food going out. We were very fortunate and made some new contacts with other businesses, like this particular one that's pictured here is a business out near Secaucus that does large distributions of produce. They were having trouble with their distribution network. So we were able to step in for a couple of months and take their surplus. The Montclair Art Museum stepped in. They gave us their art truck, their art van, to help us do deliveries. And then because, early on, this is all before masks, right? We didn't really know how to handle this virus. We worked outside to pack up grocery bags and sort through food. So we had shifts of volunteers who, I can't even tell you how impressed I was with them, would come outside and work together to make sure the community was fed. And then we had wonderful support by way of fundraising. So our faith community, and you'll see there some familiar faces. Our schools did some walkathons and sold these "We're in this together" signs and did all kinds of things for us. And very importantly, the township right away made some funding available, and the funding group in town, so it's a group of funders, including Partners for Health, the Montclair Foundation, the Schumann Fund, Montclair Fund for Women, got together and collaborated to make sure that there was money for food. So in addition to that very early work that we were doing, we knew we had to step back and thoughtfully build some new programs. And thinking back to that slide where we talked about the diversity of populations that have food need, we knew that we would have to design programs that were that would be successful in meeting the needs of those diverse populations. So these are some of the things that we had to consider in doing that. For our soup kitchen guests and for some of our pantry guests, we designed different meals that were designed to go. We built a whole new pantry. So this area over here where Jane is standing behind her, that's what used to be our dining room, which now has no tables in it and is filled with pallets of food. And then we built a pantry outside where people could choose items that were appropriate for them. We also worked carefully to continue to get food out into the community, even though we didn't have all of our partners in place. So one of the things we did was we built several different pop-up markets. This one I especially love. This was designed by Montclair Mutual Aid, and it happens once a month over at the Wally Choice Center in Glenfield Park, where different groups bring different things. Tony's brings the food. And we do a couple others in other areas that are weekly and designed specifically around food. We also knew that we were missing some people. And we had for a long time talked about doing a food truck, but we didn't have a food truck. During the pandemic, a group of high school students did a fundraiser for us. And another high school student had done quite a bit of fundraising just prior to the pandemic in the hopes of us getting a food truck. And a local donor matched those funds to allow us to get a delivery van, a large delivery van. And one of our volunteers took the van, which we use primarily for bulk pickups and deliveries, and made it so that we could convert it into a sort of a test food truck. And so that's what this is. And we launched that last February. And this is another small program that we launched, which are meal kits. So these are bags that have in them fresh produce and other items that will help make up a healthy meal. And this is something with the menus on the front of it. It's in both English and Spanish. And it's something families can cook together. And it's just really healthy. It serves between 4 and 6 people. It's just a robust meal in a bag. So I think, as I mentioned before, one of the things that happened during the pandemic was the libraries and the feeding programs and the coffee shops shut down. And those are places that usually people without housing can go in and warm up during the day. So when the winter arrived last winter, there was no place for people to go. So a group of feeding programs got together, the Salvation Army, MESH, Tony's Kitchen, and then also the Unitarian Church on Church Street. And with the assistance of the township and the funding group, put together a warming center. We were hoping not to need that this year, but unfortunately we did. So we now work with that same group to make sure there's a place for people to be indoors out of the weather during the cold of winter, during the day. And that program also provides an opportunity to check in on people, to find out what they need. We've been given some really nice 0-degree sleeping bags by Montclair Helps, which is really great for people to have. We always are distributing coats and hats and scarves, and of course, warm food. The other thing that really came home to us during the pandemic was the number. We've always distributed food, clothing and housewares and things like that at Tony's Kitchen. The number of requests that came in was just astonishing, especially for children's clothes and family clothes. And we had it in the back of our head to open a thrift shop where very high quality clothing and housewares would be available at very low cost. And so we did open that during the pandemic. And then we vastly expanded our free clothing distributions during our pantry times. So like these clothes here on the left, the coats that are on the double rack, those are going out. Those have been sorted and those are going out on Friday at one of our food distributions, one of our pop-up markets at a school. So we do both things now, both the thrift shop and the clothing distributions. So at the end of last year, we had gone from 250,000 meals in 2019 to 1.5 million meals last year. It was a tremendous 2 years of growth and expansion with so much help from our community. These are our programs now. I think I've talked through most of them. These are the ways that we try and connect with food insecure populations in the way that works for them, that is integrated with their daily lives, that allows the connection to be one that's very respectful and allows people to maintain both their dignity and their food preferences. So now we face that brave future ahead. We certainly are a changed place. I think our community is a changed community because of COVID. My impression is that our community has a much better understanding of the diversity of populations that struggle with food need in our community, that it's not just one population or another. It's very, very diverse. And I think one of the things that is so hopeful in that is that when we think of all the structural issues that families and seniors face, whether it's the high cost of housing, employment, all the things that can create obstacles to family stability and health, food is the simplest one to address. And it's the one that we can, as a community, collectively address together. And in addressing food need, we get at some of these other structural issues that families are challenged by. So we can improve core nutrition in a family, but also provide some financial relief to free up those food dollars and make them available for car repair bills or prescription medication or daycare for a young child. So looking at food insecurity is a way to improve our community's health in the most achievable, the simplest intervention. The key being that we do it together as a community, that we look at ourselves as partners and part of a collective, and that we recognize that not one solution will resolve food insecurity for all populations, which just takes us back again to the reason why we do this work. You have any questions for me?
I have a couple of questions that I want to ask you based on the dialogue that I had with you. You shared with me that there were different socioeconomic groups that became food insecure, but they didn't want any persons to know, and that somehow you found a way to identify who they were and then meet those needs. So what are the signs that help you to know? Because people are in their own homes.
Sure.
So how did you find out that there were people who were in middle-class income groups that needed food? And then how did you serve that population and they didn't want to be known?
Sure. So I think it's very hard for anyone to reach out for help. I think it's always easier to give than it is to receive. So the key is really our partners have been just a treasure to us in that. So really working with our community partners and then making connections to food in those environments is always such a great way to connect with people. One of the things I really like about the pop-up markets is that they're very festive, right? There's music, they're in a park. One of the ones we do is at a school. They feel very much like of a community. So they normalize access to food need. The other thing that we've done is in those situations, we'll hand out postcards that allow people to just email us with like their name and address and a phone number, a contact number, and then we'll get them set up on our home delivery. So there's no need to, so it's easy and there's no income qualification. There's no need to sort of prove that you have food need. So I think the key is just to listen and to notice, to make it easy for people to reach out. And so we connect, like, for example, when we launched the food truck, we launched that thinking that we were going to serve a population that is best served with a to-go meal, right? So sort of something you grab and go. So we were thinking people who are living on the street and college students, two populations where grab and go meals are really helpful. However, being in the food truck in the neighborhoods where we were doing those distributions, we were also connecting with families that we realized were not part of the food support network. They weren't getting connected in. Well, families need more than a grab and go meal. They need groceries. So those families, we had those postcards with us, and they're bilingual, English and Spanish. And so that we could get those people connected right away. And that next weekend, they would have groceries delivered to their porch. Sometimes they come through to us through a family member or a neighbor. We have many volunteers who are food insecure, right? So they're in there taking care of other people, but it's about noticing and caring enough to make something feel okay. So I don't think there's one answer to the question. I think it's, I remember walking outside one day and seeing a friend of mine who's double income, professional family, two kids in college, never would have expected to see herself in that situation, but just by just chatting and normalizing it, right? It just makes everything easier for people. And I think that one of the great gifts of the pandemic is it normalized how many of us have food need or some type of need that was unmasked by the pandemic. I think that helped a lot in many ways.
I have just one more question I wanted to ask.
Sure.
I saw in the local newspapers that there were a number of groups that were giving money to Tony's Kitchen, and there was a matching program.
Yes.
And so the appearance may be that Tony's Kitchen doesn't need any more money now. They've got thousands of dollars, or perhaps even millions of dollars. They're all set. So how are you doing?
So we had a very generous match this year. We had two matches, actually. We had one from the Silver Family Foundation, the Bravitas Group, and one from the Partners for Health Foundation. We, as you saw in those photos, our dining room is now a warehouse. And we have taken over every conference room at St. Luke's and turned it into grocery shelving. So this is something that we need to address over, can't stay this way. We also rented 2 large refrigeration units, which are in our parking lot. So we just are in the midst of planning for opening up a space that is currently not accessible underneath the sanctuary of the church. There's a very large area that's not accessible. So we're going to embark on a very expensive project to open that up, put some refrigeration in there, and move all of that, all those pallets of food in there. So, so we have a very expensive year ahead. We also have had just much higher overhead, as you can imagine. So the community has been very good to us. I think the community has understood the size of the need. But we do have, we do ongoing fundraising to support our work. One of the things when I talk about food need as being something sort of the easiest thing to address, when I say that, what I mean is we should aim to resolve it. And resolving food insecurity doesn't mean that food support organizations go away. It means that the network and the way people connect in works for all of those different populations at the times they need it. So people can plug in and plug out as needed. And that network is robust and resourced. And so that is our aim to, in the next few years, ensure that we serve 3 communities, Montclair, Bloomfield, and West Orange, that no one in those communities is food insecure. And that's an achievable goal if we put our shoulder to the wheel and use the momentum that the pandemic created and the raised visibility of what that need looks like and the diversity of the need to make sure that we're being responsible and building out that that network. And I think it's very doable. I think it's something we can do within a few short years if we stay focused.
Amen. Thank you. Is there any dialogue for our guest and friend, Ann Mernin?
I do have a question, Pastor. Hi, Ann.
Hey.
My question is with regarding to the warming rooms I'm interested in, because many times when people are homeless, they have no place to go in the daytime.
Yes.
They have respite at night. They have to be out by 7.
Right.
Or they come in at 9 or 11, depending on where they are and where that's at. But during the day, if they go to Panera or if they go to Starbucks or wherever, you have to buy something in order to sit there and inconspicuously work on your computer or whatever. So long story short, I'm interested in warming rooms or places where people who find themselves in that unfortunate predicament, but it's happening more and more.
Sure.
Where they would go during the day, where they would not feel pressured that they have to buy something to sit there so people won't know that they're homeless. And then also many times in those situations, unfortunately people have backpacks, but they can't carry everything in the backpack. And so they will try to put those things somewhere so that they will not look like they're homeless, you know. And so if you could just address some of that need.
Sure. So the warming center is actually specifically to address that daytime need. And it's a shared responsibility among partners. So the Salvation Army runs it from 9 to 2 on Monday through Fridays. And then Tony's Kitchen runs it from 3 to 6 on Mondays through Fridays, and then Saturday mornings. And then MESH, working with Unitarian Church, runs Saturday and Sunday afternoons. So it's really designed for the daytime part of it. And it's also a really good time then to identify these other needs that people might have, whether it's a pair of boots. As I mentioned, respite is open, but only below a certain, right? So, and some people, mental health really is a significant issue. It can get in the way of things. So some people won't use respite. So that's why we have those 0-degree sleeping bags. And we also have some small, some thin self-inflating pads to put under them to create insulation between, a cold surface and the sleeping bag. And the needs can be very, like just the other day, someone needed a pair of nail clippers, right? Or someone needs a pair of boots because they have an opportunity to work with a contractor, but they don't have boots. So the needs can be very, very simple, and obviously they can be more complex, but having people gather and establishing a relationship allows you to get at some of those needs.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you so much for such a rich presentation. This is Wendy. And as I heard you speaking about the different opportunities and the demographics, my heart was enriched when I heard you speak of the children aging out of foster care. I worked with YCS, who had offices in St. Luke's Church over 15 years ago. And so my question to you is, how do you all identify who those young people are who are aging out and who are possibly food insecure? So they're not sticking out of the crowd.
No. So we have worked with a group in Bloomfield that has worked with this group. And then we've also done it through, there's an office at Montclair State, and there are students there that we have worked directly with. And there are some, I'm sorry?
Working with Dr. Costa?
Not with Dr. Costa. I know Dr. Costa's group. I'm forgetting the name of it, but it's a special program up there that I'm forgetting, and I'm sorry. And we've had a few come to us through Bloomfield College.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we're very fortunate too. We have one volunteer who's done a lot of work with this population. So she also has some informal connections into it. So that's been helpful. And that's, one of the things too, is just to, we certainly have programs, that we run, but we always want people to feel like they can identify a need and connect it in. It doesn't have to be connected to a particular program. So that's a group that has, as soon as you guys see that, you have to jump in there right away,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, we have time for a couple of more questions. If there's any more dialogue for Ann Mernin, please unmute and let us hear from you.
I have one other question. I'm sorry. It's just, so this is my thing. I know a lot of people they're interested in respite and stuff like that, but to me, that's almost like the concept of you give a fish as opposed to teaching someone how to fish. So my thing is, even with everything that Tony's Kitchen is doing, and it's wonderful and it's very much needed, what is being done in terms of possibly, and I know you can't do it for every group, but what is being done to try to take people off of their need to remain connected in that way? I think one of the things you mentioned was being able to come on and off as you have need, which I thought is wonderful. But in terms of, is there anything in place where some of those members from various groups can be I don't even have the wording to, another, you know what I'm trying to say.
Right, you don't want to
Acclimated
foster a
into,
dependency, right?
correct. You
Um,
want them to become more
Yes.
sustainably independent.
Sure. So in our mission statement, part of our mission statement says, and fosters independence. And it's in there because it's something you always have to be very aware of. This is an important issue that you're raising. One of the things that I learned after having worked at Tony's is that different people have different levels of independence, and that we have to be okay with that. So for example, someone like Elaine will always have some level of dependence, right? And that's okay. But by giving her a community, by making sure that we are a community that has room for everyone in it, right? Including someone like an Elaine, then that's her level of independence that is being supported by the community broadly, right? So then you have families that slip for a period, that lose employment, that have a health issue. Those families should be able to come in and then come out, right? So you want to be there at the right moment. I'm a huge advocate of going sort of up the economic ladder in terms of intervention. So for example, sometimes people come and they sort of apologize for needing food. And my answer to them is always like, good for you. Like, you're doing this for your family, and you should do it earlier rather than later, because if you do it earlier, you're preserving your financial resources and your ability to rebuild and exit is quicker, right? So we should never be sort of frugal with food support. We should be very generous with it, right? Food support should be, because it's a financial support. It's the easiest, right? And it provides so much relief. It takes stress out of the family that doesn't need to be there. You're providing for nutrition, especially with kids involved. And then it's a financial relief, right? So we should always do that soon. So people should overuse it instead of underuse it, is always my thought on that. And then what you're doing is you're helping build those financial resources so that people are not staying in a place where there's a woman, I have to say, I admire this woman so much. She's a woman I got to know. She was in, her kids were in the same elementary school with my kids. Just like someone who was having a really, really rough moment, going through a very, very challenging divorce, employed, but just really unstable situation. And she used our backpack program to start with. The school actually connected her with the backpack program. But what I really admired about her was she continued to use the food supports as her life stabilized. And a year or so ago, I saw her on Facebook and her kids, and her older one is going off to college. I was like, it's good for you. You found a way to stabilize your family and use food to help relieve some of the financial pressure. And your kids had a more stable childhood and are going to do better because you did that, And so I'm a firm believer in making people feel comfortable to really use food supports. But I don't see it in that situation as a dependency on it. It's sort of saying, I can do this, and therefore I can make sure that my kids can go to the doctor and that they can have, my car works and I can get to work. So I think that dependence is a funny place to be,
Councilman Russo?
Yes, hi, everybody. And Ann, I just want to thank you on behalf of the town for all the work you do. When my mother died a year and a half ago, we told people to please send anything they want to my mom's memory to Mesh and to Tony's Kitchen. And Mesh, I work very closely with Dr. Ames, but you guys do a great job. I wish I could do more for you, and I'm here to help you. And
Thank you. We appreciate all the support. You've always been such a great supporter, and we appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you, Reverend Campbell, for putting this together. So I'll be on as long as I can. I've got 10 different Zooms people want me on every day. So thank you.
Well, we're getting ready to come to a close, so we're going to free you up in a few minutes. All right. Thank you all for being a part of this dialogue. Thank you, Ann Mernin, for sharing this rich and wonderful story of the incredible work that you're doing in Montclair. We certainly appreciate you. And I think your network has expanded tonight as people have got a chance to hear from you directly. And I also heard some people say that they benefited from the good work that you're doing. And certainly the good people of Union Baptist Church, you'll continue to hear from us.
No, thank you. We appreciate it.
All right.
You've been so good to us.